Hi everyone, it's Mary. Thank you for visiting. I want to show you my quilt as you go method. I have a really big quilt that I quilted on the long arm, but it's not long enough for me to have a drop on each side of the bed. So I added these sides that I also quilted. So the big middle section is quilted and the two side sections that are going to be on the drop of the bed, on the sides of the bed, are also quilted. And I've already started with the first part, which is I put the the large piece and the side together. And I have made my first seam, which you can see. Now notice, this is the back. So I put them wrong sides together. That's really important. Now that I have this seam sewn and I'm used, oh, should be 1/4 of an inch. I suggest maybe even a little bit wider than that because you're going to need to be able to, hold on, this is really heavy. You're going to need to be able to open that up and sew inside of this seam. Let me snip that. Okay, so, oh, not easy to start, but once you get started, it's not bad at all. All right. Go. Now I am using what is number 4 setting for stitches on my machine, on my Bernina. It's a zigzag, but watch what it does. It does more than zigzag. It makes stitches and goes across. So it's a really wide zigzag with a lot of stitches in it. And I'm going to do a little bit more just so you can see what it looks like. Now, if you missed a part or you let it get too narrow when you were sewing, this is where it's going to catch up with you. This does 2 things for me. Oh, all right, here we go. It, first of all, holds this seam open, and that's the reason that I even started using this. But also, it gives me some extra stitching in that seam so that I just feel a little more comfortable because it's just the one seam and I want it to be sturdy. I want it to stay. So here we go. Stitches across. I probably could have ironed that and maybe it would have made things a little easier, but I like to do things the short way. In the end, this is what we have, except I have some really ugly stitches, but that doesn't matter. At least not right now. Here we go. All right, so if you look on the back side, you will see that I have what is really just a regular seam, but I've then come back and stitched over it using that zigzag, I don't know what to call it, but it's a wide zigzag stitch that has lots of stitches as it goes across. So now this is done. And what I have is this open seam that is open, stitched down, and has 2 raw edges. And so I'm going to have to do something to cover that up. And this is what I came up with. A narrow strip of fabric in the same navy as some of the navies in the quilt. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to push this down quite a bit, hold it down, and then pin it. And I'm going to make stitches on both sides of this. Well, maybe I shouldn't have unpinned it, huh? All right, so I'm going to make stitches on both sides right along the edge, kind of like a top stitching. It's not going to be necessarily to keep the quilt together because I have already done that, but to cover up that seam and also to hold this little strip down. Go back to straight stitch. Don't forget that. No, sorry, wrong button. Know your machine, right? Okay, so right along the edge, and I'm not going to sew the whole thing, I'm just going to sew enough so that when I bring it up to the camera, you can see, oh, this is a lot of quilt. You can see what I've done. This is the problem with working with such a big quilt. Oh goodness, it really wants to get tangled up in everything. And I'm gonna try to keep it straight because I would like for it to be straight. But I'm not so sure it will be. All right, so I'm just gonna stop there so you can see what it'll look like when both sides are sewn. Back to the top. Now, notice there's all these little threads. I have two options. I can tuck them in or I can cut them away. Either way, it doesn't matter because once this is sewn, they're not going to show. I will tuck them in and I will be sure to come back and look to make sure that I didn't miss any or some of them didn't get away. If so, then I will definitely cut them away. All right. I pressed this down really, really well. It's an inch and a half, and I pressed in about 1/4 inch. So there's a space in the middle. Oh, no, I didn't. I pressed it in. There's no space in the middle. Okay, stop there, and we'll see what this looks like. So the idea is that it would blend in with the rest of the quilt and still give me this extra drop. I don't know, I'm gonna have to go look at the camera and see how it's looking. Yeah, okay, so I'm not gonna do anything more. I could, if I wanted to, come back and add some kind of motif on top of it, but I'm not going to do that. I'm just gonna leave it open like this and take a look at what it's gonna look like with the whole quilt, or a big chunk of the quilt. It's not even going to show that this is anything different from the rest of the quilt. And when you turn it over, you'll be able to see a little bit of a seam here, but I decided to go with navy instead of the colors that I used on the front of the quilt, so that it just blends in really well, and hopefully no one will come along and look at my quilt on my bed and say, oh wait, you didn't do this the way you did the others. So there you go, that's my quilt as you go method, and so far it's the method I like the most. Thank you for coming. See you later.